In this section of the university, we will be going through the CloudPBX initial setup and walkthrough. This is a brief walkthrough that will guide us through an initial setup of a new account. Although there are more advanced setups, this guide will help us learn the basics that every partner should know. Before we get started, I'd like to add that a flowchart can be very helpful for any new and existing setups. A flowchart can be your visual confirmation with the customer on how the system will route. Here's an example flowchart of how our system will be set up today. By viewing this chart, you can see that when a call comes in, it does a time check before deciding where to route the calls. During business hours, it will go to the main menu. Outside of these hours, calls will route to the after hours menu. You can also see the key press options and which extensions they will end up in. Throughout this video, we will reference this chart. We will be covering users, phone activation, extensions, call forwarding, the auto attendant, recordings, number routing, and the diagnose phones page. To access WebLink, you can go to www.freedomvoice.com. On the upper right-hand corner, there will be a login button. It's going to ask for information like the phone number associated to the account, the email address, and the password. Partners are automatically added to their customers' accounts. First, we'll start off with users. Users are necessary for employees to gain access to the WebLink interface. It is also used as credentials to access the message center from the Polycom phones. We'll start by hovering over settings and accessing the users page. Here, we can add new users or update existing user information. Once you assign a user to an extension, the extension will automatically take the username as its own name. This means that later on, under the extensions page, it cannot be renamed. Let's start by clicking the blue button that says Add New User. A window will pop up requesting the information regarding the new user. Display name. This is the username of the extension. Extension. This will be the extension assigned to this user. Email. This email address is used to log into the system. A valid email must be used in order to retrieve the password if it's ever forgotten. Role. This provides the user with a role on the system. The roles are administrators, mailbox users, and installers. Administrators have full access to the system. They can create system-level changes as well as administer the billing. Mailbox users only have access to the extensions that they are assigned to. Installers are similar to the administrator role, but primarily used by the partners. Time zone for the user is reflected within WebLink when viewing items such as reports and messages. Phone activation. After creating all of our users, we will proceed with activating the phones. Activating the phones allows us to gain the direct inward dial, or DID number for short. The DID is a unique identifier for the phones. This will ring the phone directly, and most of the time it's not given out. Once we have all the DIDs, we can properly route all the extensions to the right phones. Prior to the activation, we'll need to make sure that we have available the model of the device as well as the MAC address. The MAC address can be found on the back of the phone as well as the box that it was shipped in. Once we have all this information, we can proceed with the activation. Let's hover over settings and click on Activate underneath phones. Here, it will ask us for the make, the model, and the MAC address of the phone. It's important to put the correct make and model for any Polycom phone that you're going to activate. This is due to the firmware updates that are sent out periodically. The next part of the activation is selecting a DID. DIDs are local numbers that are assigned directly to the phone. This number will be the internal routing number, allowing us to reach the phone from any virtual extension. This number is usually not given out as it does not route into the system, meaning that it won't hit the auto attendant or follow any of the call forwarding rules in its extension. After selecting the DID for the new device, it will ask you if you require any additional trunk lines. Our recommended ratio is at least 35% or roughly no more than 3 subscriber bundles for every single trunk line. Overflow protection is a mandatory feature allowing you to burst beyond your trunk line capacity. The protection covers short-term, unplanned spikes. If a customer continually goes over the call capacity without adding an additional trunk line, they will be billed an additional $59 for that month. The next step of the activation allows you to assign the phone to the individual user, conference room, or a shared environment. Individual users will allow you to select the user that you previously created. Conference room or shared environments allows you to choose unassigned extensions. By default, the DID will automatically be added to the call forwarding rules of the extension that you're going to select. You can verify this by making sure that the box that says "Add this phone to the call forwarding list for this selected extension" is selected. Next is the time zone. This is the time that is going to be displayed on the phone itself. The last part of the activation is the E911 information. This is the physical address of the phone, provided to the proper authorities in any emergency situation. When you call for an emergency service such as police, fire department, or any ambulances, they'll already have the address where you're calling from. Acknowledge and agree to the terms and that you've applied the E911 sticker that was provided. Once this is complete, your phone is now activated and waiting for further instructions from the system. If the phone is not yet plugged in, plugging it in will connect it to our service and download any new firmware. If it is plugged in, a simple reboot will get it to be connected.
Check it.
Extensions. Next, we'll set up the extensions. Again, if there's already a user assigned, you cannot rename the extension. Hover over Settings and click on Extensions. All of our extensions are virtual. This means that they all have different rules and follow these rules once that extension is accessed. The extensions page is used to manage the names of the extensions. We'll rename the extensions 80, 81, 82 to Sales, Billing, and Support. Once we've renamed these extensions, we'll go ahead and set up the call forwarding. Renumbering the extensions is available upon request through the partner support team. However, extensions ending in 11 is unavailable. For instance, 911, 811, 411, and so on. Call forwarding. We can access call forwarding by hovering over Settings and clicking on Call Forwarding. Call forwarding is the routing for each of the extensions, as all of our extensions are virtual and can route to different numbers, users, and groups. For example, extension 81 could route to a group or a Freedom Voice DID number. You could even have it ring to multiple devices simultaneously. It's very important to make sure that you have selected the appropriate extension on the drop-down list. If you're changing settings for extension 80, make sure that extension 81 or 82 is not selected. You'll notice that extensions are named according to either the user or the extension name that was previously set up. We'll go ahead and click on Add New Entry. A box will pop up requesting information on the new entry. The first is the type of forwarding. There are a total of 3 options. Number. This routes the extension to a specified phone number. This can be a landline, VoIP line, or even a cell phone. User. User routing is done by using a presence system. Users will only receive calls if they're logged into the phone. If the presence is unavailable, they are skipped in the forwarding list. Group. This allows you to forward a call to multiple people using groups. As an example, we can have a group route to 3 people simultaneously. For our example setup, we will be setting up 3 call forwarding rules. A simple call forward to a single number, a group forward to multiple numbers, and a user forward with a time and day check. Let's go ahead and start with extension 80. This will route to the DID assigned to extension 800, who is a member of the sales department. For a reference of all the DIDs assigned to the phones, you can navigate to Support and Diagnose Phones. You can open this in a new window or tab for easier access. Extension 80 will route to the DID for the phone activated on extension 800. First, we'll make sure that extension 80 is selected from the drop-down list. We'll then go ahead and click on Add New Entry, leave type as number, and we'll go ahead and enter in the DID. We'll put a description in here labeled extension 800 DID. For this setup, we'll go ahead and leave the time zone to US Pacific as that's where we're located. Go ahead and click Save. The next two forwarding entries are going to need to reference groups. So before we go ahead and configure our next forwarding rules, we'll go ahead and create the groups. We'll need to hover over Settings and Forwarding Groups. Here we'll go ahead and create 3 groups for our setup. Our first group will be for the billing and will ring the users on extension 800, 801, and 802. We will click on Add New Group, give it the name Billing. Once we click Save, we'll be in the Editing Group page. Click Edit on the method. There are 5 forwarding methods in total. Call rotation. Rotate through each member of the group, with each new forwarded call picking up where the previous call left off in the rotation rather than starting over at the top. Most idle. Most idle forwards calls in descending order of how long they have gone without answering a forwarded call. Most idle members will be first attempted, least idle will be last. Least call time forward calls in ascending order based on time spent answering forwarded calls that day, with a built-in algorithm to gradually ramp up newly available members. End waiting forward calls starting sequentially from the top of the list and skipping unavailable members. Group members towards the top of the list will tend to receive a greater volume of forwarded calls. Simultaneous forward calls to all members of the group at the same time. The first member to answer the call will receive it. Groups using this method are limited to a maximum of 15 members. For our groups, we'll go ahead and use simultaneous forwarding. Click on Save. Next, we will go ahead and add new members. Just like call forwarding, we can choose the type of forward that will occur. We will select User and add extension 800. We will also add the users on extension 801 and 802. Remember that users are required to log into the phones in order to receive calls. Now we've created a group for billing that will ring users on extension 800, 801, and 802 simultaneously. Let's return to the forwarding groups page and add more groups. For this setup, each group will route to the same set of people using different forwarding methods. Our next method will be call rotation and will be called the support group. We will add the DIDs for the extensions 800, 801, and 802. We will follow the same steps as our first group. However, this time we'll change the method from simultaneous to call rotation. Our last group will be the After Hours Support Group. This is a group that will be a simultaneous ring group and will ring the same extensions 800, 801, and 802. Now, if we return to Settings and Forwarding Groups, we should see 3 groups here: Billing, Support, and Support After Hours. Now that we've created our groups, we can return to the call forwarding page. Again, that's under Settings and Call Forwarding. This time we're going to do extension 81, so let's make sure we select extension 81 from the drop-down list. Extension 81 will route to the billing group instead of a number. Let's go ahead and click on Add New Entry. Changing the routing to Group will provide a drop-down list where we can select the newly created groups. It's not really necessary to add a description, as the group name should tell you more than enough, but you can do so if you'd like. Again, the time zone will be left on US Pacific. Go ahead and click Save. Let's now select extension 82 from the drop-down list. We'll click on Add New Entry, select Type as Group, and select the Support Group. Again, it's not necessary for a description, but it is still available. We'll do the same thing for the Support After Hours group. We should now see 2 groups for the forwarding rules on extension 82, Support, followed by Support After Hours. Now let's go ahead and set up the time and day filters for these forwarding rules. Under the forwarding entry, you'll see a button that says Add Time/Day Filter. Pressing this button will allow us to set the schedule for the forwarding entry. This list is in sequential order, meaning that it will start from the top and work its way to the bottom. It will check the first entry on the list before going to the next. We'll go ahead and set the first entry to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and this will be for the normal hours for the support queue. We'll then set the schedule for the support after hours group to 12 a.m. to 8:59 a.m. and 5 p.m. to 11:59 p.m. Monday through Friday. Once we click Save, we'll go ahead and add another filter to cover Saturday and Sunday. We'll leave the hours from 12 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. and only check Saturday and Sunday. This gives us a route 24 hours, 7 days a week. During business hours, it will route to the support group, and outside of the hours, it will route to the support after hours group. We've now accomplished setting up our call forwarding rules, and now we can configure our auto attendant. Auto attendant. The auto attendant is a key feature for routing customers. It is the menu that will allow callers to route to the appropriate departments. Hover over Settings and click on the auto attendant tool. Every new account will have a basic menu that all local or toll-free system numbers will route to. On the auto attendant page, you can see which numbers are routing to which attendant. Everything on this landing page is a variable and can be selected. It's recommended to start with recordings and follow up with the business hours and holidays and exceptions. Remember that there are really three parts to every menu. The normal hours, that's the menu that's going to play during regular business hours. After hours, which is the menu that will play outside of the normal business hours, and the holidays and exceptions. Let's go ahead and start with the recordings. Adding recordings to this page will allow you to select that recording during your menu setup. This is the initial recording callers will hear, so it's very important to be clear and concise. Here's an example of what an auto attendant sounds like and the recording we will use today.
Thank you for contacting the initial support company. For sales, press 0. For billing, press 1. And for support, press 2. If you know your party's extension, please dial it at any time.
You want to make sure that you provide the options clearly for your callers and provide a decent amount of time for them to make a selection. I'll go ahead and click on the Add New button to the right of the recordings. A window will pop up allowing us to give the recordings a name. There are two options for uploading recordings. Option 1 is to have the system call a direct line. This can be the DID or a cell phone number. Option 2 is to load from audio file. This allows you to upload a professional audio file that you may have on your computer. I'll go ahead and select option 2 and select the file from my computer. We'll go ahead and upload another recording that will play during the after hours and another one that's going to play during the holidays and exceptions. An after hours greeting sounds like this.
You've reached the initial setup support company. Our offices are currently closed. Please give us a call back during our normal business hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you'd like to leave a message, please stay on the line.
Once we upload all the recordings, we'll go ahead and move on to setting up the business hours and holidays and exceptions. This is done in the auto attendant page by clicking the Add New button on the right of business hours. A window will pop up requesting the name, start time, end time, and the days. You can have different schedules depending on the day by clicking on the Add Schedule button. You only need to input the business hours, and everything outside of those hours will be considered after hours. Once you've created business hours, go ahead and click Save. Next, we have the holidays and exceptions. This is similar to the business hours, but plays a completely separate recording. As the name states, it's commonly used for holidays and exceptions. it will request a name, start date, and time, as well as the end date and time. Click Save once you've created your holiday schedule. Once we've completed all of our schedules, our variables are in place to be selected for our menu. Click on the Edit button next to the basic menu. We'll start by adding our holidays and exceptions. You'll see a blue button that says Add Holidays and Exceptions. This will bring up a window that will allow you to select the holidays and exceptions that you created from a drop-down list. Go ahead and click Save. Now we will do the same for the business hours. Again, click the button that says Add Business Hours and select the hours from the drop-down list. You'll notice that when you add the hours, they will show up under the schedules. You will see your business hours, after hours, as well as the holidays and exceptions. Each one of these items can be selected to configure the auto attendant for that schedule. This allows you to have different key options as well as recordings for the different events. Let's leave our normal business hours selected. Our next step is to select the recording we would like to use for our normal business hours. We'll go ahead and use the recording that we uploaded labeled Auto Attendant. Next on the list is the keypad options. These are all the settings that determine where a key press will route the call to. By default, the first 6 keys, 0 through 5, will go to extensions 80 to 85. Option 6 is set to do nothing. Option 7 is to go to the default extension, which is set under Menu Defaults. Option 8 is a very important key press option. Leaving it at Go to List of Extensions will allow callers to dial the 3-digit extensions. If the customer wants to use extensions series such as 100, 200, you'll need to go ahead and request that through the partner support team. 9 is set to repeat the menu. Star is set to go to the setup menu. The setup menu allows you to make changes to recordings and access voicemail boxes when you're outside of the network. The pound sign will go to the dial by name directory. Using the flowchart, we can change each key press to route to the appropriate extension. In this setup, we have left everything to the defaults. The next part of the auto attendant is the configuration of caller inactivity options. These settings will allow you to determine what happens if a caller does not press any keys. We can set how many times the menu will repeat, the pause between, and where the calls route to after the recordings have played. So by default, the after hours menu as well as the holidays and exceptions are set to do exactly the same as your normal business hours, unless specified to do otherwise. You can make changes by clicking the menu under the schedule portion here. You should see basic hours, after hours, as well as the holidays and exceptions. Selecting it will highlight it in green. You can make changes by clicking on the Use Custom button. Otherwise, you could just leave it how it is. That completes the setup for the auto attendant, after hours, as well as the holidays and exceptions. Number routing. Now that we've completed most of the setup, we've saved one of the most important parts for last. That is the number routing setup. Number routing allows us to select a destination for our system numbers, but we cannot send it directly to a DID. This is accessed by hovering over Settings and selecting Number Routing. There are 2 types of number routes, by number caller dialed and by number calling from. The first is based on the internal or system number that's dialed. These are local or toll-free numbers associated with the account. This allows you to select one of your system numbers and specify what that number is going to do. If we click on Edit, we can get a better understanding. We'll see a box pop up that allows you to select one of your numbers, give it a label, and properly route it. We have 5 options for route types. Call forward to, allowing you to send the call to a specific extension. Leave voicemail for, sending the call directly to the voicemail box for a specific extension. Send call to, allowing the routing of the number to a menu. Reject call, playing a busy signal. Receive fax to, turning the number into a dedicated fax line. Every new number added to the account will automatically route your calls to the default menu. Routing by number calling from allows you to route a call depending on the number that's calling in. This is useful if a specific number calling in needs to be routed somewhere immediately or to a specific user or group. Once we've confirmed that the numbers are routing to the appropriate place, our setup has been completed. So just to recap some of the things that we've done here, during our setup, we covered the creation of users, phone activation, phone diagnostics, extensions, call forwarding, auto attendant, as well as the number routing. And that concludes the CloudPBX initial setup and walkthrough.